If you thought that you were going to get even a moment's reprieve after last episode, then I have some bad news for you. Crisscross doesn't pick up exactly where the last episode left off chronologically, but it does thematically. It starts off with M.E.C.H still on their quest to learn whatever it is that they are trying to learn about Cybertronian life, though because they did get what they needed from Breakdown, we can't assume that what they're looking for now, the specific thing that they're looking for, is at least different in this case. And their search for another Transformer to take apart and study leads them to the forest where Arachnid is still holed up. She gets the jump on them, but is greatly outnumbered by them. And while she's technically not a Decepticon anymore, she has been keeping track of Decepticon radio chatter, and so knows who M.E.C.H is and how dangerous they are. While, if not given any other choice, she probably would have been happy to die killing all of these various humans, she proposes a different plan. She doesn't want to die, they don't want to die, so teaming up here rather than killing each other would be beneficial. And she still wants RC, so she offers to help them capture RC if they help her find Jack and RC and lure them into her trap. At which point she will torture Jack to death and then torture RC for a while, and they can have whatever's left of whichever one they prefer. She doesn't really care. And while it's perfectly obvious that this isn't going to lead to some lasting partnership full of trust and good feels, that at a moment's notice, either side will betray the other, it does at least get them working together, which is the premise of this episode, for the most part. From here, we jump immediately to a scene of Jack bringing RC home. Like, I hadn't really realized this. I didn't even remember it from my first viewing of the series, but RC's actually been staying at his house, which makes sense. She's the only one of these Transformers characters whose cover is specifically that she's the vehicle belonging to her human partner. But I hadn't really thought about it before, and it's an interesting detail. RC lives at his house. When she's not working or driving him around, she lives at his house. And so I can certainly understand some of the fan interpretations of their relationship when that is true, and also they're pretty clearly a little flirty with each other as they're coming home. Like, there's a chance that poor naive Jack doesn't even realize it, but it felt really flirty. Their dialogue here felt really flirty, and it was weird, but also kind of cute and endearing, so I honestly don't know what to think about it. Either way, it did its job. It showed that these two are closer than they've ever been. So that the reveal that Jack's mom is standing there waiting for him because he's been showing up late and hasn't been doing well at school to take his motorcycle privileges away from him hits with the amount of impact that it's supposed to impact with. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's this bird right outside my window. He's always there. He's always there. And today, for whatever reason, he's decided to punctuate like half the things I say with calling. Point is, Jack's mom takes RC away from him. She expects to see RC in that garage for an entire week, never having moved, and that's a problem because RC is a Transformer. She has to go out and do Transformer things during the day. And it's specifically because of this setup that I really hate the opening teaser for this episode. I really wish that we had gotten the stuff with Arachnid teaming up with M.E.C.H after we had gotten this scene here. If it had, this episode could have started out looking like it was going to be some kind of zany comedy, where Jack had to keep RC's clandestine activities from his mom, while also keeping in his mom's good graces so that he could earn his motorcycle privileges back. Maybe even ending with the moral that Jack has to learn to be more responsible so that stuff like this doesn't happen again. After all, his irresponsibility has put RC in danger of, at the very least, being discovered by someone who wasn't supposed to know about her. It would have created expectations for where the episode was going to go so that later they could then subvert those tropes and really surprise us with the direction that the episode ended up going in. But instead, we already know that M.E.C.H and Arachnid have teamed up to capture Jack and RC, so we don't buy this. We don't buy this scene as some accurate representation of where the episode's going to go. Where the episode could have shifted tone very quickly, it doesn't at all because the tone's intense from the very beginning, and I just come away from it feeling like it's a huge missed opportunity to do something really interesting. Which is not to say the episode's bad, it's still a really intense ride. Jack actually does try to tell his mom about RC and the other Transformers, which is something that RC refuses to help him with, and his mom doesn't believe him, obviously. And RC reminds Jack that they can't go around telling more people about their existence. You think that at the very least the episode's going to be about them keeping RC's secret from June while all this stuff with Arachnid's going on. But even that doesn't end up being the case. With M.E.C.'s help, Arachnid is able to identify who Jack is, and they go and grab Jack's mom to bait their trap. Jack and RC show up expecting only M.E.C.H to be there, but Arachnid is there as well. She immediately webs RC and then sends Jack out on a hunt to find his mom within a period of time and rescue her, or else Arachnid will torture both of them to death. Typical Arachnid stuff. And Jack is shown once again to be far more capable than you would expect of a small fleshy human. He does manage to get to June before the clock runs out, but he doesn't manage to save her before the clock runs out. And it looks like he's going to have to deal with Arachnid alone, which is a situation that he certainly wouldn't survive. But RC this entire time has been working to get loose from her bonds, and before M.E.C.H can start taking her apart, she manages to get free and go after Jack and Arachnid. She gets there in time to have a big epic fight with Arachnid, but June sees all of it. She knows now that everything that Jack told her about the Transformers is true, and to her credit, she doesn't freak out too badly. And we do get a bit of a twist where we really get to see how capable Jack is. M.E.C.H had this tech in place which would scramble any transmissions they tried to send out and even cause feedback to RC which would harm her, preventing them from contacting the other Autobots or even Agent Fowler. But Jack, in what seemed like a ploy to appeal to Silas's humanity, managed to get a piece of tech off of Silas that he could use to contact Fowler himself. Fowler shows up and drives M.E.C.H and Arachnid off, but unfortunately Arachnid does scan the vehicle that Fowler showed up in, a black helicopter, and now she has a vehicle mode because for some reason she didn't have a vehicle mode when she came to Earth. I still don't know why they choose to do this in Prime. I don't know why these Transformers don't still have their Cybertronian vehicle modes in this show, but whatever, I'm moving past it. Arachnid now has air transit capabilities, which makes her significantly more dangerous than she already was, and M.E.C.H observes her scanning the helicopter, and apparently the method by which Transformers get their vehicle modes is exactly what they were trying to discern, so now they have more information too. And as big of a threat as M.E.C.H has been showing themselves to be lately, and as much more threatening as they became in this episode, that's a big deal. That really hits you hard. As does the scene where Jack finally takes his mom for a ride on RC, taking her to the Autobot base to meet the rest of his friends, but it hits hard in an entirely different way. June is super cool about all this. Fowler was there immediately after she learned all this was true to help her with the transition, and she understands the necessity of the Autobots to still protect Jack. The necessity of Jack still being involved in all of this. Whereas a lot of parent characters would have tried to pull him back from all of this and protect him themselves, she just kind of lets it be, at least for the time being. And honestly, it's really cool. You don't expect it. You don't expect any of the kids' parents to learn about this stuff this early on. I also think it's really neat that in an episode in which Jack called RC family, that did happen earlier in the episode, Jack and RC have to team up to save the third member of Jack's little family. There's something almost poetic about it. And I mentioned that M.E.C.H feels even more threatening now than they ever have before after this episode, and building upon that, the scene where we see them about to dissect RC, I will say I had a lot more trouble with that scene than the corresponding scene with Breakdown in the previous episode. I had more trouble with that scene than the scenes of them actually taking Breakdown apart in the previous episode, because now we know how horrific this process is, and it's about to be applied to somebody we actually care about. Like, I didn't remember this episode well enough when I went in to rewatch it to recall if they had actually hurt RC at all, so I was on the edge of my seat during that entire scene. It was super effective. Like, all of the scenes in this episode that try to be intense are super effective. The only weaknesses I really see in the plot of this episode, as it ended up being, like I said before, I think the plot could have been structured differently to make it better, but the plot as it exists, the only weaknesses I can really see in it are that Arachnid's involvement really isn't as strong here as it could be. Most of the stuff with Arachnid is just rehashed from her previous episode, but utilized in different enough ways that it's still fun, but still, it's mostly a rehash of the same plot, and she doesn't really get to do anything new or interesting here except be around humans without trying to kill them. And also, the final fight between RC and Arachnid takes place at night with, like, no artificial lighting around at all on a dark metal tower. It's honestly a little hard to see what's going on, and so that fight didn't really have the excitement factor that I feel like it was meant to. I felt myself tuning out a little bit in kind of the same way that I tend to tune out during the action sequences in one of the Michael Bay Transformers movies, because you can't tell what's going on. And while that's probably an unfair comparison because this still wasn't nearly as bad as some of the movie fight scenes, I still think it could have been handled better. Overall, though, this was a super intense episode that had some neat twists to it that I feel like could have had even more great twists to it, but was still really good regardless. And the fact that they placed this episode immediately after the episode that came before it does show that this show is not going to give us a break when it doesn't feel that we should have a break. That when this show wants to be super intense, they're going to be super intense and keep that intensity